Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gustavo Tolosa, and I'm the host of this online book club. We have read four, maybe five books so far, starting from about June or so of last year of 2020. So today is April 1st, 2021. Happy April Fool's Day, everyone. And I am glad to be back. And we're going to be reading a book that is really appropriate for these times because diabetes, especially type 2, it's rampant. It's something that is affecting, I think, every one of us has a family member or a friend, a coworker. It's truly an epidemic. Now, many children are being diagnosed with diabetes type 2, and it is a horrible disease. I was particularly touched by it because my father had diabetes, and actually several family members from my father's side. And if I knew, then what I know now, but I can't think about that too much because it just makes me feel sad. So because my father passed away very young, and I could have helped him, and he would probably, most likely, be alive today. But this information was not available to me then in 1999. And what can I say? New research and doctors like Dr. Neal Barnard and many others, many others, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Gregor. I mean, so many doctors that I have done interviews with have done their own research, or they present the research being done. Dr. Neal Barnard is the president of the PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He is also a professor of medicine at universities, and he is actually a practicing physician. And so this is going to be a very good book club. I hope that you will let other people know about it, and let them make a decision whether they want to join or not. So I hope that you have this book, whether it is in paper like mine or electronic or whatever, because I think that you will get more out of it if you read ahead of time, and then I highlight parts, we discuss, ask questions, comments. Today we will not have a guest, but we will have guests every now and then, and I'm going to show you something in a few minutes that I think you will enjoy. Okay, so let's get started with the introduction of the book by Dr. Neal Barnard. And the introduction says a new approach to diabetes. And he says that this book presents a method that is a revolutionary method for preventing, controlling, and reversing diabetes. And it is based on true scientific research. So the prevailing notion, even up to today, is that once you have diabetes, you will always have diabetes, and that the condition actually gets worse and worse, and you get more complications in your health. And unfortunately, that is the idea that is still still around, even in the medical circles. So, but that scenario has changed. Yes, it takes time. It takes time for change to happen. I don't know. I cannot think of any major changes in history that just happened overnight. It will take time. So Dr. Barnard says we will focus on changes in your menu, not on drugs. Yes, medications often have their role, but I would much rather help you scale back on drugs or eliminate them entirely. So he wants to emphasize that you will not need to cut calories or limit carbohydrates or stick to small portions. In fact, you can eat until you're full. If you get hungry between meals, you're free to eat more. What we will zero in is on the type of food, not the amount. That has always been the issue, whether you're trying to lose weight or control your diabetes. The issue is the type, not the amount. So on page 12 of the introduction, it says a new idea. And Dr. Barnard tells us how his father was also a medical doctor and was an expert on diabetes. And he says that worldwide, more than 400 million people are living with diabetes. If that is not a world emergency situation, I don't know what would be. 400 million people in the world right now, probably more since the book was written, have to live with diabetes, with daily blood tests and a growing list of medications that aim only to slow down the inevitable damage. A patient's life becomes just a waiting. It's a waiting room to disaster, unfortunately, and death. And I saw that, like I mentioned at the beginning, with my dear father. Now, at last, we have a much more powerful approach. I'm talking not about just a bold new idea, but about an entirely new approach to diabetes that has been tested and proven. So there has been a series of studies conducted first with Georgetown University and George Washington University, both in Washington, D.C. And those studies are very important. So he says, Dr. Barnard says, that from the beginning, our studies aimed higher and took a more aggressive approach to diabetes than clinicians had in the past. The first study was small. It was just 13 patients, and it tested a program that relied entirely on changes in diet. There was no new drug, no magical supplement, not even an exercise program. But the results were amazing. 2/3 of the patients improved so much that they were able to reduce or eliminate their medications within 12 weeks, just 3 months. The study was published in Preventive Medicine in 1999. So it was actually published in a medical journal. Then, in a second study, this time involving 59 patients with varying degrees of blood sugar, some healthy, others pre-diabetic or diabetic. We studied why diet changes work. So in 14 weeks, the diet led to a 24% improvement in insulin sensitivity, that is the body's ability to respond to insulin, the sugar storing hormone that is dysfunctional in diabetes. The main thing to notice here is that the diet changes alone were powerful enough to boost insulin sensitivity and bring blood sugar under better control. These results were presented at the American Diabetes Association scientific meeting in 2004 and were published in the American Journal of Medicine in 2005. This is very important because the American Diabetes Association now has this information, and I am not sure how much you're doing to, to let people know, to make it available, but I believe it should be readily available. Starting in 2003, with the support of the National Institutes of Health, we conducted a new research trial to compare our diet head-to-head against the guidelines promulgated by the American Diabetes Association at that time. The study was conducted with George Washington University and the University of Toronto, and included 99 now individuals with type 2 diabetes. The participants were randomly assigned to either a standard diabetic diet based on the 2003 ADA guidelines, or to the more aggressive diet you will learn about shortly. Along the way, I, meaning Dr. Barnard, presented the study's initial results at scientific meetings of the American Association of Diabetes Educators and the American Public Health Association. In a careful analysis that kept exercise and medication use constant, we found that the new diet controlled blood sugar 3 times more effectively than the previous best diet. We then ran 2 studies with Geico, the insurance company, to see how it would apply in the work setting in 10 different cities. In a word, it works great and is easily to implement. We have also had documented its efficacy against more advanced diabetes, focusing on improvements in nerve symptoms. So this book translates these scientific breakthroughs into tools that you can use, including an easy-to-follow plan with simple diet guidelines. Then it says on page 14, a new understanding of type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is much less common than type 2. It is usually diagnosed in childhood and is invariably treated with insulin. Hence its former names, childhood onset diabetes and insulin-dependent diabetes. Yes, in this book club, we will focus mainly on type 2 diabetes because 9 out of 10 people with diabetes suffer from type 2. But we will mention type 1 because it is mentioned in the book. Type 1 usually will require insulin. You may, with this diet approach, you will probably be able to use it less, as we will see later when Dr. Barnard talks to us about it. But type 1 diabetes is usually just patients have to continue using insulin. So unlike people with type 2 diabetes, those with type 1 always need to take insulin, but they can use diet and lifestyle changes to keep doses to a minimum and reduce the risk of complications. It may surprise you to learn that the process that leads to type 1 diabetes begins when the body's immune system attacks the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas. As you will see, new research has revealed what appears to spark this attack, and that can help to prevent it. Then on page, for pretty much for the remaining of the introduction section of this chapter, Dr. Barnard talks presents some success stories, which are very important to read. We won't go through them now because of time, but please read them because you can see there what actually happens to real people, and you or someone you know may fit one of these cases, and you can learn more about what course to take. Now, on page 20 of the introduction, where it says taking control, the last paragraph says, however, our research and this book also targets a broader purpose. More and more people, including a surprising number of children, are diagnosed with diabetes every day. So it says on page 21, is this program for me? You may be asking. The answer is an emphatic yes, and here's why. And there are bullet points, and one of them says, whether you like to cook or prefer to eat at restaurants, you can easily make the diet changes you need. Some people imagine that changing their diet means making every meal in their own kitchen, or that you have to somehow get hundreds of recipes that are complicated, and it's not the case. It can be, and it is very simple. Number 2 here, it does not matter whether you love exercise or have never been able to stick with an exercise plan. The improvements described above were made without exercise. And that's not to say that exercise doesn't have its place and that it's good for you. But the research that Dr. Barnard mentions did not include exercise. You may have issues, like he says here, if you are not unable to engage in significant exercise because of joint problems, a heart condition, or severe obesity, or if you find you're just not able to stick with an exercise program, you will be glad to know that the benefits of our diet change are not dependent on any alteration of your activity levels. And lastly, on page 22, it says, if you have felt that you just cannot stick with a diet, I completely understand. That's why we will focus solely on what you eat, not how much. You will have to learn to think about food in new ways. Yes, there is always a little bit of a learning curve, and you will have to unlearn some old and outdated notions. And I always tell people, science changes, it evolves. Otherwise, we would still be in the Stone Age. So it evolves. So sometimes it will require that we unlearn something that is outdated or that is not correct anymore. So what does it mean to reverse diabetes? He says on page 22. Most people with diabetes find themselves on a road leading toward gradually increasing weight, slowly rising blood sugar, higher doses of medication, and worsening complications. Reversing diabetes means reversing this trend. If weight is an issue, it can come down gradually but decisively. Blood glucose values that have gone up can also come down. Doses of medications that have risen again and again can come down too. Symptoms such as neuropathy, nerve pain in the feet and legs can improve and even disappear. Heart disease can be reversed. Will the disease go away completely? Some people would argue that once someone has diabetes, that person will always have it, even if blood tests improve so much that the condition is no longer diagnosable. What they mean is that the genetic traits that made type 2 diabetes possible do not go away, and type 1 diabetes require continued insulin treatment, regardless of how well you adjust to your diet. It is not possible to say in advance how far you can go. Will you be able to reduce your medication doses, eliminate some or perhaps all of your medications, or drive your blood sugar down so far that no one would ever know that you once had diabetes? These are questions your own experience will answer, but I can promise this book will teach you what you need to know about putting a powerful food prescription to work. The rest of the story is yours to write. All right. So that's the introduction, and I hope that was interesting. I hope that you read it, and if not, that you will read it, since I did not read every single page. And now we're going to go to part 1 of the book, which is chapter 1, and it says the new basics. These are not the basics. These are the new basics. Before we do that, I want to show you something that I made today. And at the end of the webinar, we'll talk about a recipe in the book that is very useful for breakfast. And I am experimenting. I think most of you know that besides performing as a musician, playing the piano, which is my lifelong career and passion, my other passion is cooking. I just love to cook. I love to make recipes that are already written by somebody else, but I also like to experiment and make my own. So look at what I made today, and I'm still experimenting. This is a eggplant, stuffed eggplant and corn. I put a side of corn. It could be a side of anything. But this eggplant is promising. It's crunchy on the outside. You eat the skin. It's soft and meaty on the inside, even though, of course, it does not have an ounce of animal product in it. And I will make it maybe once or twice more to adjust spices and things like that. And then I'm going to do a webinar where I will show you how to make it. But I wanted to show you that after this webinar, I'm going to attack that and eat all of it. All right, so the new basics. What are the new basics? How do we know it's diabetes? Well, I remember very well, my grandfather was a medical doctor. My father was a medical doctor student who could not finish his career. And I remember hearing in my family all the time how if you went to the bathroom a lot for urination, to urinate, and if you drank, if you drank a lot of liquid, those were red lights. Those were signs that you probably had diabetes. And that's still true. And Dr. Barnard mentions that, and he also mentions fatigue. So fatigue is one, for no apparent reason. Then it may also seem that you're losing water more rapidly than you should be, which is to say that you make trips to the bathroom more often than usual. And you're thirsty. You find yourself drinking a surprising amount of water. We're not talking about a glass here and there. We're talking about drinking water in large quantities, water or whatever liquid. The fundamental problem is that sugar is not able to pass from your bloodstream into the cells of your body. So I think that that is something that we all need to memorize and learn, that that is the fundamental issue of diabetes type 2, that the sugar in the bloodstream cannot get inside the cells of your body. From that one little problem, come many others, like, one domino knocking over another and another and another. So I'm on page 3 of chapter 1, and it says the sugar we are speaking of is glucose, one of the smallest and simplest sugar molecules. In this case, sugar is not just another word for junk food or, like sugar, like white sugar, table sugar. The fact is that the cells of your body use this kind of sugar, which is glucose, as an energy source. You have to understand that the only reason that you and I have energy to do the things we need to do every day, the only reason we have this gasoline, this fuel, is because glucose is used in our bodies for fuel, for energy. It powers everything. It powers our movements, it powers our thoughts, and more or less everything we do. So on page 4, it says, if glucose is unable to enter your cells, then they are deprived of their basic fuel, so you lose your energy. That is why you are fatigued. If your muscles don't have the glucose they need for power, you get tired easily. Now, as glucose passes through your kidneys, it carries water along with it, lots of water, hence all those trips to the bathroom. So, fatigue, frequent urination, and thirst are all symptoms of one problem. Glucose is having trouble getting into your cells. You may also find that you're losing weight. And let me tell you, this is not the best way to lose weight. And I do remember my father and family members getting really skinny, but it was a skinny type that where you could tell that the person was ill, was sick, and this is not how you want to lose weight. You lose weight because your cells are basically, they are starving. Nutrients cannot enter your cells, so your body is malnourished. As overly large amounts of glucose flooding through the bloodstream day after day can harm our arteries, this is a bad situation. Left unchecked, it can damage the heart and the delicate blood vessels of your eyes and your kidneys and extremities. But as we have shown in our research studies, the road to high blood sugar is a two-way street. When you change your diet and make other healthful improvements, a rising glucose level can fall. Sometimes the change can be so dramatic that no doctor looking at you afterward would ever guess that you had once been diagnosed with diabetes. So how do we know that, how do doctors diagnose diabetes? So on page 5, Dr. Barnard tells us, well, if your blood glucose level is 126 milligrams per deciliter or higher after an 8-hour fast, then you have diabetes. So you really want to be under 100. Your blood glucose is 200 or higher after a 2-hour glucose tolerance test. This is a test, I remember my father taking it, in which you drink a syrup, which is disgusting, or used to be, I don't know now, containing 75 grams of glucose, and your body glucose value is measured. You also have the A1C blood test, which should be 6.5% or higher. And you can read more about that on page 5. Yes, not all diabetics drink a lot of water or lose weight. So these are guidelines that symptoms, we could say, that can be present or not. I think that as the time goes by and the disease and the condition is not treated, maybe those symptoms will become more and more evident. But at some point, we will have a doctor, as a medical doctor, as a guest, and we can ask that. So then on page 5, we have diabetes types. And, this is interesting. I think that it is an interesting read for you to learn more about the different kinds of diabetes. There's more than just type 1 and type 2. But on page 6, it says that about 9 out of 10 people with diabetes have type 2. Most people with this form of diabetes, of disease, still produce insulin. The problem is that their cells resist it. Insulin tries to bring glucose into the cell, but the cells respond like a door with a malfunctioning lock. So, you have insulin, which is a hormone, is trying to bring this glucose, which is the energy, to get it inside the cells. And so in a way, insulin is like this key that opens the cell so that the glucose can enter. But for some reason, which we will learn, the cell, is not responding like a good door, and the lock is not functioning. In response to these sluggish cells, then your body produces more and more insulin, trying to overcome this resistance. If the body's insulin supply cannot overcome the resistance, glucose simply builds up in your body. So, yes, drugs work to counteract this problem. Some make your cells more responsive to insulin. Others cause your pancreas to release more insulin into the bloodstream or block your liver from sending extra glucose into the blood. Until now, most diabetes diets have tried to compensate for the cells resistant to insulin's action. They limited the amount of sugar in your diet. They have also limited starch, because starch is actually made from many glucose molecules joined together in a chain. During digestion, starch breaks down to release natural sugars into the blood. The idea is that if you do not get too much carbohydrate at one time, your cells will not be overwhelmed with too much glucose. So for people on medications, typical diet plans have aimed to keep the amount of sugar or starch fairly constant from meal to meal and from day to day, so that the amount of medication required to help your body process glucose can stay the same too. In short, these diets have guided you on what, when, and how much to eat. New research has changed everything, however. This is on page 8. We can now use diet changes to influence insulin sensitivity directly. So, as you will see shortly, the nutrition prescription has been completely rewritten to take advantage of this new understanding. Then he talks about pre-diabetes and the values, the numbers that you should keep in mind in case you have, you know, if you're fasting and your glucose level is between 100 and 125, then that's pre-diabetes. So that's on page 8. Then on page 9, it's something that is very good because it brings hope, I think, and it doesn't make us feel that we are destined to have this horrible condition and illness, disease. And that is when it says genes are not destiny, page 9. You've probably heard, I've heard it all my life, diabetes runs in our family. So diabetes runs in families, but don't take that to mean that if one of your parents has diabetes, a similar diagnosis has to be your fate as well. You can change things. You know, genes, a propensity to have diabetes may be there, but the final factor that will make those genes activate the disease, those are under your control. So it says, if people eat the same kinds of foods their parents did, they are very likely headed for the same diagnosis. If our genes call for diabetes, we do not necessarily have to listen to them. We have more control than you might imagine. And then it says eating patterns for diabetes, and I'm on page 10. If you are like many people, you may have found your diet tough to sustain. And the whole purpose of this book is to show you the diet. Then it says, however, we now have good scientific evidence that allows us to see which diet changes really work best over the long run. And soon you will be putting that power to work. Then he talks about drugs and money on page 10, 11, and 12, which is the end of the chapter. And there is some, information there that it's disappointing to see how money and companies have so much power. But on page 12, at the very end, it says each person with diabetes has a unique ability to heal and return to health. This ability differs from one person to the next, but in our studies, we have not seen age, weight, or any other factor to be a barrier to improvement. The remainder of this book will show you what I believe to be the most powerful dietary approach to diabetes that is currently known. And I have not read Mastering Diabetes book. I will put it in my list actually to read it. So I want to share with you, to close here, on page, let's see, on page 197, where it says breakfasts. There is a very delicious breakfast. This breakfast is called barley with fruit, and it has a lot of soluble fiber and a wonderfully low glycemic index. And, tried rolled barley, which is also called barley flakes, for your breakfast porridge. It takes a bit longer to cook than oatmeal unless you soak it the night before. And you can serve it with your favorite plant milk or not. It doesn't matter. maybe with a touch of brown sugar or with a little bit of maple syrup, although I don't use any of those anymore. For me, the sweetness of the fruit is enough. And so this is the recipe for one serving. It says 1/3 cup of rolled barley or barley flakes. And of course, you can double the recipe. 1/3 cup, 3/4 cup of water, 1 tablespoon wheat bran, half of a medium apple with the peel, cored and chopped, or any other chopped fruit, and 1.5 teaspoon ground flaxseed. I'm leaving out the 1/8 teaspoon of salt because I don't really need it. And then the night before, you can combine the barley, salt, and water in a microwavable bowl, cover and refrigerate overnight. Use a 1 quart or larger bowl because barley can really expand. And then in the morning, you can add the bran and apple or other fruit to the soaked barley, and you cover the bowl with a microwavable plate and microwave on high for 2 minutes. Then finish cooking on medium for 4 minutes and stirring the flaxseed. Or you can cook it on the stove, putting everything together and cooking for 15 minutes, stirring occasionally until the mixture have the consistency of cooked oatmeal or the consistency that you like. If you like it more watery, then maybe 15 minutes is enough. If you like it more creamy, you may want to leave it longer. So try that recipe. And this recipe is in the book. You may want to go at the end of the book. There is a section that says breakfasts. And I think I can take the time to type the recipe. When you receive the email with the replay, I will go ahead and type that recipe for you. It's simple, but and you can use any fruit you want. But it's a nice change from the usual oatmeal to try barley. All right. I want to encourage you to help me a little bit by just subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you have Facebook, like my page, which is Dr. Starch on Facebook, and visit my website, which is plantemus.com. Plantemus is plant, PLANTEMUS. And I have some cooking shows there, some free videos in my YouTube channel. I have a lot of free videos. And next week is going to be a very crucial session, and I hope maybe you can bring some people that you want them to hear the information, because next week we're going to be talking about reversing type 2 diabetes, and it will be a very interesting topic. Either next week or the following week, we will have a medical doctor as a guest, and you will be able to ask questions. So I'm glad to be back with our book club, and I will be sending the replay within 24 hours. Thank you, everyone, for joining. As always, I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing these names that are becoming more and more familiar. And have a wonderful week and holiday. In many parts of the world, Easter is celebrated. And if you celebrate it, I hope that you have a wonderful Easter. And I will see you next week on Thursday. Bye-bye.